Hi, everyone. My name is Danny Hardeman. I'm a past chairman of the Leasing and Property Management Committee here at MetroTex. And today we're going to be discussing the new flood disclosure addendum requirement for residential leases in the state of Texas. Okay, so I also want to start this by saying this is not legal advice. I'm a licensed broker, as many of you are on the phone. You guys know, as licensees, we cannot practice law. So this is not legal advice. Please speak to your attorney if you have any questions about this. If you're a member of the Texas Realtors, you can contact the Texas Realtors legal hotline as well if you have any other questions about what we talk about today. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about this. All right, so how did we get here? All right, so as you know, the Texas Legislature meets every odd year. So this was a legislative year in Texas. The legislature has passed House Bill 531, which requires landlords in the state of Texas to disclose to a tenant if their residential rental property falls within the FEMA floodplain or has flooded within the past 5 years. Okay, so as a result of this requirement, the Texas Realtors has created a new form for us, a new addenda for the residential lease. So we're going to pop that up on the screen real quick, and we're going to go through that, and just so you can see what it looks like. All right, here it is. All right, so this is the new form. You guys probably are very well aware of the format of the Texas Realtors forms. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom real quick. This is form TXR 2015 in your form library. Now, this goes into effect January 1st of 2022. I just want to make everyone aware it is now available for use. You should find it in all of your form libraries. Okay, so as you can tell, this is a one-page addendum that is now going to be added to leases effective January 1st. So let's just go through it real quick. As you can see on here, it basically says this is an addenda that's a disclosure of a landlord's knowledge as of the date signed by the landlord. We'll get to that in a second, so that's really important. So what your owner / landlord is going to do is they need to disclose in section A if this property falls within the 100-year floodplain. Now, a question we always get is, what exactly is the 100-year floodplain? Now, this is land designated as a flood hazard area that has a greater than 1% chance of flooding each year. Now, these maps are constantly updated by FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and you can get to a searchable database on the FEMA website where landlords can enter their address and determine if that property falls within the 100-year floodplain or not. So that's what you're going to need to advise your landlords to do. And then they will simply check a box if is or is not aware if the property is falling within the 100-year floodplain. Section B of this document is the disclosure of if this property has flooded, period, within the past 5 years. Okay, so the landlord will simply check a box here, is or is not aware, if the unit has flooded at least once within the past 5 years. Now, they put it on the document not just for you as the licensee's sake, your client's sake, but also for the tenant's sake. They understand what the definitions of both of these are. So let's look down here. We talked about what the 100-year floodplain is, but this is a question that's always asked, is what is the definition of flooding? So flooding is defined as a general or temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of a dwelling caused by the overflow of inland or tidal waters, the unusual and rapid accumulation of runoff or surface waters from any established water source, such as a river, stream, or drainage ditch, or just flat out excessive rainfall. Now, you'll notice on there, this does not say anything about like a busted pipe flooded a unit, right? That happened to a lot of people back in February when the whole world froze. Let's say a water heater bust floods a house. That's not applicable to this addendum. It has to be one of these things as defined if the owner of the landlord is going to check they are aware that flooding has occurred. Okay. Now let's look at the bottom of this form real quick, and then we'll take this off our screen. Notice there are simply spots for the landlord to sign and spots for the tenants to sign. Notice there's no spot for the agent to sign. Okay. So you shouldn't be signing these disclosures. I would recommend that you double check that your landlords have entered a date. Not only did they sign it, but they dated it as well, because that date is very important because it's looking back 5 years from that date. Okay, so make sure your landlords are not only signing it, but dating it as well. Okay, so again, form 2015 in your form library is where you will find this addendum. And again, it's already in zip forms, so you should be good to go. All right, so we're going to take that off of our screen now. So let's go over just a few of the questions that typically come up as it pertains to this form. The number one question is, when is it required? Now, again, we mentioned January 1st is when it goes into effect. You can go ahead and start executing it now if you'd like, but when do you actually have to give this to the prospective tenant? The answer to that is at or before the lease signing. So you can do it at lease signing, or you can do it before. I've heard of many property managers in the industry are going to be disclosing this up front in the application process. Honestly, it will potentially save some time if someone is going to back out due to what they may see on this form. So you might want to consider that as well. Can agents complete and sign this for landlords? And the answer to that, as you probably guessed, no. In fact, you don't want to help your landlord fill this thing out. All that does is adds more potential liability exposure to yourself or your brokerage. So make sure that you're not filling this out on behalf of your landlord if you're representing a landlord. You always have the duty to disclose. You know, if you know of any material facts, like if you know that it flooded, you definitely are supposed to and required to disclose that to the prospective tenant. But you're not required to do any type of additional research on your own simply for the sake of a disclosure. Okay, another question that's typically asked, is it required if we know it's not in the floodplain and it's never flooded? Answer is yes. It still has to be completed. So make sure that you are not forgetting this when you're drafting leases for your clients to execute. Another one, addendum, required to provide on lease extensions when extending leases or leases go month to month. Okay, so if the lease goes month to month, that is not a new lease agreement. So in that case, you're technically not required to provide the notice. The same thing goes as if you're executing the one-page Texas Realtor form lease extension document. That document is an amendment to the lease. So as an amendment, it's not triggering a new lease. Therefore, you're not technically required to give this disclosure at that time. Now, if your practice is on lease extensions, you draft brand new leases from scratch, that is a new executed lease. Therefore, it would trigger this disclosure. I think your takeaway here is, in my opinion, what I would do if it's a renewal, if it's going month to month, if it's just a lease extension, one-page document, I would go ahead and get this disclosure out of the way just to have all your bases covered. Okay, so let's talk about worst case scenario. So let's just say you didn't do this, right? And what if the landlord failed to disclose this and the unit floods? Then what happens? So here's a reason why you want to make sure that you're getting this signed, because property code states that if you did not make this disclosure and the unit floods, which results in damage in excess of 50% of market value of a tenant's personal property, that the tenant will then have the right to terminate that lease. So you can probably see now why this is very important that you do get this document completed, executed by your client, and in the hands of your tenant. So your tenant doesn't have that ability to terminate that lease. Okay, I want to end this with one last thing, not legal advice, as we said. Don't forget, if you're a member of the Texas Realtors, you have the legal hotline if you have questions about this, but there is a load of information for you at texasrealestate.com. So feel free to log on to texasrealestate.com. There's all kinds of FAQs and resources out there on this subject and this addenda. And last but not least, the MetroTex Leasing and Property Management Committee is meeting on January 20th, and this is going to be one of the topics that we cover. You don't have to be a committee member to join us for this meeting. We are meeting at 10 a.m. If you go to mymetrotex.com, you can see the calendar for all of the committees at MetroTex. So the Leasing and Property Management Committee meeting for January is January 20th at 10 a.m. We'd love to have you join us, answer any questions that you have about this disclosure. So that concludes our FAQ session on the new flood disclosure as is required by state law now. I hope everyone has a happy holiday season, and I hope 2022 is your best year yet. Thanks so much.